Will a niche JRPG series come back from the brink and rise to its former glory, or is it doomed to fade into obscurity forever? Well, there's no telling what the future holds, but we can certainly reminisce on our time playing the series. Join us now as we discuss the Golden Sun series on the newest episode of Pause and Effect. Please enjoy. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Pause and Effect. I'm your host, CJ, and joining me this episode are my friends and returning guests, Kat and Andrea. Welcome back to the show, you two. How are you?
Doing very well, man. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Kat, how about you?
Hanging in there.
Good stuff, good stuff. By personal and popular request, the subject of today's episode will be the Golden Sun franchise. This includes the original Golden Sun on Game Boy Advance, its sequel, The Lost Age, which is also on Game Boy Advance, and its DS sequel, Dark Dawn. Now then, first impressions. When thinking back on experiences with this series, what has stood out the most to you and why?
I guess I'll start. So, I guess the biggest thing for me would be the puzzles. Golden Sun to me is basically one of the most creative games I've ever played as far as puzzle solving and just sort of the aesthetic quality of solving those puzzles. Synergy, using all the different kinds of synergy to solve puzzles and all the cool effects that they had was, I don't feel like any game before or since has quite done things like Golden Sun has. And every time, like, and even Dark Dawn, which to me doesn't quite stick out as much as the first two games, the reason that game was fun was because of the puzzles. They are typically, they're challenging, but they're not frustrating. They're very creative, which I already mentioned. And that's kind of it. Is the puzzles are really what stick out to me.
I think for me, it was a combination of the characters and the storyline. I definitely agree about the puzzles. Like those, they were fun, they were creative. They were a bit of a head scratcher here and there, but it was never so difficult that it was maddening. Like you could figure it out, or in the early dawn of the internet, you could find some information about some of those, or back in the old day of the game guides. But I think what stood out for me the most was just how well done the characters in the cast were. Um, it's one of those classic RPGs that has a silent protagonist, and yet he is one of the most expressive silent protagonists I've ever seen. In between his little, exclamation point, dot, dot, dot. I mean, you really did, even though there was absolutely no dialogue, no words coming from Isaac, or later Matthew, I felt like it still did such a good job of emoting and expressing what that character was feeling. And it was kind of nice to have a protagonist that you just kind of assumed did speak, but maybe didn't speak in the same way that some of the other characters did with dialogue or whatnot. I think it was also just a fun cast of characters. It was a fun storyline. The combat was challenging. Just basically the whole game still sticks out in my mind, even all these years later. And gosh, I loved the heck out of it back in the day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of those points, like the characters, the story. I'm gonna add in the music as well because there's some bangers across all three of the games. And not
Mhm.
only that, like even one of those songs even made it into a Smash Brothers, so that's got to mean something.
I forgot about that. I
Yeah,
completely forgot
they
that made it into Smash.
yeah they had like that little medley of like Felix's battle theme and the Doom Dragon theme, I believe.
Yep, exactly that. But the other thing that I want to point out too is mechanically it's very sound. Like Andreas said, there's a lot of puzzles in these games that are really thought provoking, and once you solve them, you're like, oh, I got it. But the other thing that really stuck out to me too was the class system, because these games probably have the most unique and interesting class changing system I've ever seen, like more so than like Final Fantasy or anything like that. Simply by equipping the genies to your characters, you change their classes, which then changes their synergies and how they function in battle and how they function even outside of battle in a number of different aspects. And you use the genie. Oh, you can do summons and stuff like that. And then once you do the summons, oh, you have to wait. And then just being able to mix and match, like, oh, you have like the 4 different elements, you can mix and match 4 different elements up to 4 just to see what each character turns out to be. And I thought that was definitely probably one of the more unique ways to do class systems that I wish game companies or indie developers would try to recreate, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, I kind of, the Jin have like always, or Jinny, you know, they've always kind of stayed with me because they were just so cute. I just wanted one as a pet.
I think we all did.
Yeah. And I loved everything they did with them. I loved how you could actually play the game without getting them for the most part. Like you kind of started out with a few and, you know, inevitably came across a couple as you were traversing the world map. But I liked that you could beat the entire game without getting all of them, but it added so much to the game if you did go out and put the effort into, you know, traversing maybe those odd locations or ones where you're like, this is really suspicious because there's nothing here, but oh, hey, look, new little friend just popped up. Yeah, you're right. I loved the elemental system in this and the class system.
Yeah, there were so many classes in the game that you really couldn't possibly try them all on one playthrough without like wasting, you know, like 20 hours just messing around the menus. But that coupled with the fact that, you know, each character kind of has his or her own strengths that, you know, you just play around with all sorts of different combinations. Like, dude, when I first found out that there was a ninja class in the first game, I was like, oh my God, this is the best. And that's actually where, so like my username that I use the most is GS Ninja, right? And that stands for Golden Sun Ninja. And I remember when I was first trying to come up with the name, originally it was going to be GS Lord because Isaac was my favorite character. Lord was his highest class in the first Golden Sun. Around the same time, I started getting obsessed with Naruto, obsessed with ninjas. And I found out there was a ninja class in the game. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going with GS Ninja. That sounds a hell of a lot better. And I've been sticking with that name. And I've been sticking with that name ever since. But yeah, the class system is dope. And there's so many different Jinnies, so many ways of using them. The first 2 games, you know, people have said it before, but like graphically, you know, just no, you never saw anything like that on like a handheld gaming device, right? And it's just Catastrophe, Judgment, Eclipse, like, oh my God, all those things look so cool.
It was gorgeous. Absolutely. Like watching those summons was like the best part of those battles. Like not just because they did a ton of damage, but just watching the graphics like flow across the screen in kind of that slightly pixelated style. Makes my heart swoon. I loved that so much.
Yeah, and even when Dark Dawn did the shift to 3D summons, I'm like, oh, this is still just as cool.
Yep.
Yeah, they had that. What was the name of that one? They had a new summon in that game that was kind of like a chandelier dragon.
I forget its name, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
God, I wish I remember.
Dim Dragon? Crystal Lux?
Crystal Lux.
That's it. I may or may not have Googled it.
I was about to.
Yeah. That was a little like short silence right there. We're just like, wait, where's Google?
This is why it helps to have double or triple monitors.
Yeah.
Oh goodness, I forgot how pretty this dragon is. Oh gosh, this just makes me want to replay the game.
I found my old GBASP and DS recently. I actually popped in the first Golden Sun and I started replaying that. I was a little disappointed in myself. I used to know the first 2 games just like inside and out, where all the Jinny were, everything. And I'm playing the first game, and for like the first time in my life, I actually had to sit there and think, okay, where was you know, like I do meet Flint at the beginning, right? Like the fact that I actually had to think about it was like, wow, what kind of Golden Sun fan am I?
I do got to replay the last stage at some point because it's the only game that I've never finished.
Really?
I got up to the final boss and I kept getting my ass kicked. And me as a kid, I'm just like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore.
I get it. I get it.
I'm at the same point with Dragon Quest 9 too. I want to replay that too.
Oh.
I'm with you on Batten Kaitos. I'm stuck on that final fight. Have been for years.
I've still never played that game, but I really want to. But trying to find a physical copy of it is Jesus Christ.
Is it really that hard?
Yeah. Like I think the cheapest copy I found on eBay was like $120.
Highly recommend if you can find a copy. Maybe
Or-
not Golden Sun, but you know.
Or if I can just find a ROM and emulate it, that's probably also fine.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Most of the GameCube era stuff is out there.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we can all agree at some point that JRPGs are a dime a dozen these days, but each one has their own unique quirks and conventions that keep people invested. What do you think it is about Golden Sun that kept people invested? And do you think this series has withstood the test of time?
Ooh. Go ahead. If you've got a good
Sure.
answer, go for it.
Short answer, if Dark Dawn is any indication, as is, no, it has not. And part of the reason I feel that way is because part of what made Golden Sun, the first two games, as unique as they were, mainly I think was the graphical capabilities at the time and kind of how much they wowed us, back in 2001, 2003. And everything was fresh at that time, right? The class system, the Ginny, the synergy, the way they did puzzles, everything was fresh. But then you fast forward, took 7 years between the Lost Age and Dark Dawn to come out. And, you still have a very traditional, turn-based battle system that already in 2010 was becoming very outdated. The puzzles were still cool, but, they didn't necessarily do anything to make them seem any different than what they were before. The story kind of took a downturn. The characters, I mean, the infamous thing about Dark Dawn, is somebody says something, everybody in your party has to react, right? And then another person says something, and everybody has to have some sort of reaction to it. And then that game ends on a cliffhanger. And I was kind of worried for the future of the franchise even then, because it definitely seemed like it was fresh, and everybody who started with it loved it. But then Dark Dawn came out. It was disappointing, I think, to a lot of previous fans, and it didn't really do anything to kind of wow a whole lot of people to kind of bring them into the series. So while the third game did end on a cliffhanger, and there's just, I guess, you can never say never, right? But unless Camelot really does something to innovate the franchise, I'm a little skeptical, really, to see where it goes from here. And that's really it.
I would definitely agree with that. I think the first two games have held up so well over time. Admittedly, like if you compared them to a game that came out in the last few years, like there's obviously going to be a pretty big gap between those, just from a technology standpoint, from a design standpoint. There's certainly been, especially with the dawn of indie games, which, have exploded over the last, say, 5 or 6 years. There's just certain things that at the time it was such a perfect example of like what could be done and how good storytelling could be done, how good puzzles could be done, combat, etc. But exactly to your point, unfortunately, when Dark Dawn came out, I remember how excited I was when they announced it, and I was almost in tears because I was like, oh yes, they're bringing it back, like this is going to be great. I sat down and played it, and my heart broke a little bit. So it was like, this is not the experience I remember. This is not, the characters that I fell in love with. This is not the storyline that I was kind of expecting. And Camelot's done good work before, certainly. But I suspect that it had just been too long of a gap between when 2 had come out and then when Dark Dawn came out. The franchise was certainly still there. There were still definitely fans of it, but just that gap, it was just too big. Like Dark Dawn needed to come out with a better storyline, 2 or 3 years after the last game, after Lost Age. And as much as I want to see how this franchise would end, I'm also really scared that it would just be a bigger letdown than Dark Dawn.
Yeah, and for all the listeners, I don't think Dark Dawn is necessarily a bad game. I enjoyed it for what it was worth, but I think I beat the game in like 22 hours, I think was my final.
Yeah, it took me like 20 hours, 2 days.
Yeah, it's much shorter from what I remember than the other two. But
yeah, so you come in with the expectation that it's going to be like the first two games. It's a good game, but yeah, it just doesn't hold up to the legacy that the first two games kind of set up for us.
Yeah.
Everything you guys just said, I'm pretty sure like Yeah, exactly those things. There's a reason why OG Golden Sun and The Lost Age are looked back on a lot more fondly than Dark Dawn. Not to say, like Andrea just said, that Dark Dawn is a bad game, but at the same time, like I can remember my own frustrations with Dark Dawn and how like even though it did some cool things, like for example, we have a werewolf character now, which was kind of funny, but at the yeah, but at the
Oh
same
man, I forgot
time,
about that.
see what I mean? At the same time, like you can remember details of like games that oh maybe you didn't like as much compared to the other games of the series, but maybe in my case when it comes to the first two games, even though I remember bits and pieces, like the majority of the experience is all a blur. And I'm pretty sure that's a testament to like how much I was just like so absorbed and focused and trying to enjoy myself, even despite my frustrations with the puzzles as a little kid. But I'm sure like there is probably reasons why like OG Golden Sun and The Lost Age can be downloaded to Wii U through the eShop and not Dark Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
And also like Dark Dawn too, like it seemed to be setting up like it did stop on a just giant cliffhanger like, oh, are Isaac and Garrett dead? Like we need to know. And it's been 12 years and still no answers. But but the thing that I think really helped the first two games withstand the test of time is like, oh, the second game starts immediately after the first. You get to link the games together and get a couple different bonuses here and there
Mm-hmm.
regarding like story bits and lore and like extra genies and stuff like that. But at the same time, like I think the lack of that with Dark Dawn really also contributed to what hurt it.
Yeah, and also I just realized this now. Like right before we started this, we were talking about how Golden Sun came out in 2001. This series is over 2 decades old.
Oh gosh.
It just struck me like I said 2001, and like as you guys were talking, I looked at the date on my computer and I see 2022. I'm like, oh my god, wait a second.
That brings me back.
Like I was 9 when this game first came out, and I just turned 30. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, so I think the nostalgia is like very, very much real here.
I think that was what they were shooting for when Dark Dawn came out, where they were like, it was so heavily reliant on that nostalgia rather than just making a good game by itself. I think they were relying a little bit too heavily on just the expectation that folks who missed the Golden Sun games, the first two, were going to come back and pretty much regardless. I think we're going to play Dark Dawn. If you enjoyed anything about the first two, it was like, okay, this is a revival. This is great. But it's just kind of like what every other what film is doing, what other video game franchises are doing.
Sure.
There's some franchises that have been around for 25, 30, 40 years at this point. So I do suspect that was a little bit of the background behind Dark Dawn, but I'd still like to know how it ends.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
We need closure.
Right, just even a little like a comic or an anime or like something. Just give us our ending, please.
Like, could you imagine like an Advent Children's style,
Oh,
like ending the Golden
gosh.
Sun with
That would be so
Oh my
good.
god, yes. That,
with
like
with
that just
Isaac,
seems
Isaac and Felix leading the rest of the cast against whatever
Oh my God.
4 or 5-headed dragon it's going to be.
All right, Camelot, where is this? Camelot, guys, come on.
I just like excited myself a little bit just thinking about that. Like, oh shit, let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So we just need animators. We need the voice cast. We got this. How hard could it be?
Yeah, exactly.
we just need funding. That's all we need.
Yeah. Just that might be well, you know what though? I can guarantee you if we had like a proof of concept and we put that on Kickstarter, it would get funded.
Until the Nintendo ninjas take it down.
Well, yeah, but that Nintendo's going to do that no matter what. So
yeah,
why don't we plead our case with Elon Musk? I mean, he's about to listen. He's about to drop like $41 billion on Twitter. Like, he's got to have something left over to fund this little project, right?
I kind of love that, and I would love. Go ahead.
I want to see
Sorry,
that. I was just saying, I want to see that now.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I would love like if there were like some indie animators who were just starting to kind of break into their own, some indie voice actors. Like, it wouldn't necessarily have to be, on the level of like Advent Children as much as I would love to see that. I think it'd just be a really fun project, like just to do kind of an animatic or something like that. So Nintendo, if you hear this, if we decide to move forward with this, please don't take it down. Like, support this. You haven't given us an ending to Dark Dawn yet. Like, just let us have this. Just saying.
Yeah, I think
this one small
I think we can end the episode there. I'm kidding.
Just our plea to Nintendo. Just send this as a call to arms.
Yeah. Oh fuck, absolutely. Okay. Like retrospectively and retroactively looking back, like, is there anything about the series, positive or negative, that you would have changed for the better given the chance to do so? If so, why?
Well,
Dark Dawn.
I was about to say, could you imagine the first 2 games if when he killed an enemy, the next person didn't just defend and just like actually attack the next available enemy?
That game would have been so much faster.
Like, I mean, considering remakes have been like all the rage for the past decade in gaming, like, why not remake those games with like updated mechanics or something? Like, that'd be. But I guess a little bit more to that question. I suppose the big improvement that I can think of that kind of comes off the top of my head is maybe just shortening the length of conversations and dialogue, because as excellent as the first 2 games were, this was that was just an issue across the whole series, because interesting story, interesting exposition, but ultimately when I'm playing a video game, I want to be playing the game. I'd want to sit down for 20 minutes listening to an entire conversation. Doesn't matter if it's about Lemuria and how relevant that was towards the history of Wayard. I want to play the game. You can't have conversations lasting that long, and it's just something that JRPGs as a whole still kind of struggle a little bit depending on the game. But Golden Sun in particular has definitely suffered through just these really text-heavy scenes, and they could definitely do with making them a little bit shorter.
I can agree with that, and in that same sense too, like, because Dark Dawn was especially egregious of this. Like, come on, not every character needs to get their 2 cents in whenever something happens.
What?
Like,
exclamation point?
Like, please, not all 9 of the party members, and I'm including Kraden in that. Like, not everyone needs to say something all at once. Please just let the people who are most applicable to this keep talking, and please let everyone else shut the fuck up.
Absolutely.
That gets me heated.
But yeah, aside from that, I don't know. I can't really think of anything else.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all of the dialogue from the games from what I remember, although I can guarantee you if I played them now, like 20 years later, I likely would agree with your point. Especially given like there's a lack of time now. I think all of us are, doing work or doing projects or whatever. And like, I just don't have time anymore to dedicate, except for Fire Emblem, to dedicate like 40 hours to a bunch of dialogue that sometimes is irrelevant or just really didn't advance the story or advance character interactions or anything like that. But I think I think as you had said, like positive or negative, something, CJ, remind me, something to keep around. Was that the question?
No, what would you change?
What would I change? Got it. Sorry. Brain went off here for a second there.
All good. No worries.
I think I probably would have changed the way that a few maps were set up, and perhaps where, as much as I loved the exploration in these games, it became very difficult to find the last few Dijin as the game went on, and I would get frustrated. I remember as a kid, I was always like, oh my gosh, FOMO, I'm afraid I'm going to miss this Dijin. I'm walking out of this area. I can guarantee you there's another one floating around in the middle of nowhere on this world map. Like, I think it's something that you see in like old Final Fantasy games and a lot of old JRPGs where there's not great direction in terms of like you as the player don't really know what the next step is, which is, where quest systems and mission map indicators, that sort of thing. And I don't remember if Golden Sun did a ton of that. I don't remember that being the case. You had a tendency to just walk into a town and then sometimes a cutscene would happen. So I think I probably would have liked to have seen a little bit more direction and a little bit more of a changed UI in that respect. But genuinely, I think if any major changes were made to the first two games, I do think it would be a different experience. And I don't know if I would want that as a player.
I'm with you there.
They definitely, I feel like when Camelot made these games, there was definitely, excuse me, there felt like there was an expectation that you would explore like every nook and cranny every step of the way. And even with people who have like that much time on their hands, it gets a little tiring after a while, and you just kind of want to flow through the game and sort of enjoy it at least every now and again. The Jin thing definitely was an issue. Like after like every playthrough from the second playthrough, or at least starting with the second playthrough, that's when I would like look up a guide to see what I missed. And then like I would be looking at like, you know, old game facts, like those old guides, and I'm just like, how much did I miss? Like,
right.
Like what the hell?
The funny thing was, like, I had strategy guides for the games that I did have, and I would constantly be what's the word? Like reading into them just to see like, oh, can I get everything? And even then, like, what made me slightly upset was The Lost Age, because ironically I played that before the first Golden Sun, so I didn't have the connectivity thing. And they're like, oh, I'm missing out on like 5 or 6 Jin because I don't get like I didn't connect my game to like the older game in the series. And I'm like, oh, come on. And then the other one too was, I recognized when I was playing Dark Dawn that I missed out on a couple different things, but because I was at the point where like, oh, the eclipse is happening, there's like half of the map is just covered up with like some weird eclipse. And I'm playing through it and I'm going back to the places where I missed Jin so that I could grab them. And I recognize, oh, I can't actually go back to some of these areas that I missed. They're like completely walled off to me now. So I missed out on like 3 Jin because of that.
Ooh. Yeah, because that, if I remember right, that map started locking itself off as the game progressed, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think it had like maybe 2 like points of no return that you had to be aware of that you wouldn't be if you played the game the first time.
Original Golden Sun is like that. Dark Dawn is especially egregious of that. The Lost Age, not so much, because the moment you get the wings, it's like for the ship is like, oh, I can go back to all these places now.
I don't think the first Golden Sun ever prevented you. I don't think there was ever a point where you couldn't go back and find all the Jin, though, right?
Maybe I'm misremembering.
I like at the very least. Sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say, because the only, like, obviously, like Soul Sanctum at the beginning of the game, like obviously that got walled off right afterwards, but otherwise I can't really think of. Maybe I just don't remember any other points.
Yeah, I'm kind of digging through my memory after, you know, frankly 20 years of not playing Golden Sun. But I remember that you did have to go back to certain points because you didn't have the right was it the synergies? Yeah, where you'd have to get, you know, a new party member, or you'd have to find how to use the new synergy, or you'd have to, you know, improve something or other. Which I know did wall off some Jin from at least from the beginning. Like you could see one, you know, beyond a cliff or something. You're like, all right, how do I get there? And, you know, you'd have to figure it out. But yeah, I genuinely don't remember if GS1 did any lock-offs or anything.
Yeah, they definitely had some weird, and like again, you would not know these if you didn't have a guide, or you were just like, or you just had literally all the time in the world, and you would just periodically go back to all the places you were visited before, right? Like I remember in Vault, you know, like the city you visit right after Vale. Once you get Reveal, you could go to the south part of the town and use Reveal on like it would show an entrance, and you could use Frost and stuff like that to kind of get through this cave, and then you would get, it was either like, I think it was a Venus Genie in the town, but like how could you possibly know that after you get Reveal? And it's like after getting Mind Reader, it's like, okay, this is like one of those things where it's like it opens up like a whole new dimension of the game, but like, do you really expect me to go back and Mind Read everybody, or like use Reveal on everything? It's like, what the hell?
I will say though, it does at least reward you for it. Like it could have
Totally.
gone the route of like, oh, well, you just got these 8 new amazing abilities and you've just spent 4 hours backtracking to, a city that you visited at the very beginning of the game and womp womp, nothing for you here. But I mean, at least the game was like, okay, we know you might come back here, so here's a reward if you do. Although making that one of the Jin was kind of not great,
Yeah.
especially because you could beat the final boss without all of them, of course, but it made it so much easier if you had
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah, Camelot definitely wanted you to like invest a lot of time, which
Mhm.
I mean it was I mean they're great games. Like why not?
Oh yeah.
I also really like on the topic of reveal, I like the fact that when you use it over barrels and stuff, they would shine if there was an
Mhm.
item in them. Which I just thought was like a really nice little touch, you know?
Absolutely. Made
Mhm.
it so that, you didn't feel like you were missing out on a lot of things. Like the game reminded you, like, yep, there's more secrets and hidden things. You just have to come find them, have fun.
Oh, by the way, really quickly, I want to kind of backtrack here. When you were talking about stuff that stood out to me. For some reason, in the first game, Colosso has always been something that I was obsessed with. I don't know what it is about it. It was just something about the whole concept of like gladiators and like parsing out your characters who can like cheat and use synergy to like move an obstacle here to make it easier for Isaac to like go across all the obstacles and then fight his opponent.
Oh, I
Oh
completely
yeah.
forgot about Colosso.
Like that was super freaking cool.
Whoa.
It was one of those things that I think like really epitomized like what Golden Sun was
Uh-huh.
about.
Yeah, because it was, if I remember correctly, it was completely optional, right? Like you didn't have to do it.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. But it rewarded you pretty heavily if you did like participate, from what I recall.
Mm-hmm.
I do also
Or
remember
yeah.
in that same vein, like something similar to Colosso was the Shaman Village Gauntlet run in Lost Age.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that got you the hover. I think that got you the hover gem afterwards.
It might have. I don't quite remember what you got at the end, but I'm just like, okay, you go across this weird gauntlet, and if you just so happen to win, you get a little bit of an edge over an insanely hard boss fight, but that
Mm-hmm.
about covers it.
Yeah, that was pretty cool too.
Like Moapa and his 2 nights, I think I spent a month on that.
Oof. I do remember fighting Poseidon a number of times. I think in this, or the, was it Poseidon? The boss in like
Oh, fucking hell.
that water area.
in the Sea of Time, yeah, right
Yeah.
when you're getting to
Oh my
Lemuria.
gosh. I think I was actually on a flight to Hawaii, if I remember correctly. And my batteries were dying because of course this was in the age of, you had 2 AA's in there, and if they died,
If
all
they
was
died, you're
lost.
screwed.
Yep. And I was so close to beating him, and I could see my little red light indicator being like, hey, FYI, your batteries are dying. I was almost in tears going, it has taken me so long to get to this point. Don't you dare die on me.
Oh, I know that feeling.
What cracks me up is that the GBA at one point released like this little I guess like lithium ion pack where like it replaced the batteries and it was rechargeable. And that was like the first instance of like rechargeable anything I ever remember having with my electronics. And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. For those of you listening, by the way, this is 20 years ago. Like things were very different back then.
Back in our day, we didn't really have rechargeable batteries.
The world is so much different now, and we're all old as fuck, but all we have are our memories.
Thanks for the memories.
I think one other thing that I like remember happening, especially with Dark Dawn, because that was the weird thing, is like, oh, they have all of these optional dungeons that you can get to at the end of the game, just to be like, oh yeah, you can go here, get a bunch of summons, and or at least like end game summons if some things are giving you trouble. Like I tried to get them for Doom Dragon in the Lost Age, and I still didn't win. But the one thing I remember in Dark Dawn was you can fight Star Magicians super early. Like I think I was level 32 when I challenged him accidentally, and I ended up fucking winning. And like this guy's supposed to be end game. You need to be at least level 50 for this. And I still ended up winning, and I power leveled all the way up to level 48 from winning that fight. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, did I actually win? Or is this game too easy? Like, I think that's another thing I'd retroactively change about Dark Dawn. Like, can the game be a little harder
A
as
little more
opposed to
challenging.
Lost Age take and like even OG Golden Sun taking me years to get to the final boss, and then like Dark Dawn it takes me like what 20 hours. Like, come
The,
on.
those games were punishing. I mean,
Yes.
if you could, if you really wanted to grind, like pretty effectively in GS2 from what I remember.
Mhm.
But even grinding, that didn't guarantee anything. You could be 20 levels ahead of an enemy and they could still kick your ass if they tried hard enough. You know, that's where your summons came in, that's where your class choices made a difference, but still ultimately those games were, I would say, far more challenging than the final GS game.
Ironically, that's the exact beef I have with Octopath Traveler.
Really?
Yes. And
Okay.
ironically, that segues perfectly into my next question.
It's like you planned this.
Yeah, sort of. Are there any other JRPGs that you might recommend to people looking for an experience similar to Golden Sun? Because I would say Octopath is one of them, simply on the basis of how the game plays and how its class system works. And while not necessarily a JRPG, I would also qualify Code Vein under that, which is Bandai Namco's Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm. It's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the end now, and I'm just slow going with it. But but the class change system in it, I'm like, oh, this seems like even I know this is a Souls game, but this feels very reminiscent of Golden Sun. At least to me, it does.
For me personally, Golden Sun, yes, I just spoke a lot about how unique it is. So it's hard for me to find something that kind of compares. But I think because also of how traditional it is, as far as its mechanics, and sort of the way the story is told as well, for people who either like Golden Sun or want a taste of something similar to Golden Sun, I have to point them to something a little bit more retro, like Breath of Fire's 1 and 2, for example.
Wow.
Yeah.
That brings me back.
Like the thing is like when you think of like the great JRPGs of the GBA and sort of like before that, I think those are some like the truly timeless games because the JRPG formula really hasn't changed a whole lot when you think about it compared to a lot of other genres. Partly because of the way they do world building, partly because like they so heavily like lean on narrative and character design, and the battle systems are typically just fun, right? And they tend to hold up the test of time. So if you want to try a game like Golden Sun, you want to try a JRPG, maybe even from the SNES era, that kind of holds up, because you'll find a lot of similarities as far as like the way the games are told. The battle systems, like the kind of attacks, like there's always like strength based, magic based. I feel like there's a lot of similarity there. So like I would always suggest Breath of Fire, even Chrono Trigger to an extent.
Yeah.
Let me think. I was gonna say Secret of Mana, but not really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Not really.
Final Fantasy 4.
Okay.
If we're looking for like really a specific recommendation, I think is a great game for any Golden Sun fan. If for some reason you haven't played Final Fantasy 4, which is one of the greatest games of all time in my opinion.
Oh my.
But not as good as Golden Sun, of course. But
I'm inclined to agree with that though.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
That's tricky because I think I'm looking at it more from a perspective of, if you liked Golden Sun's story, some games that I would probably suggest as opposed to maybe similarity in gameplay. As we kind of had mentioned earlier, Baten Kaitos, I think, is one of those quirky, odd games from that time period where developers were trying to figure out, how do we do a new battle system and still kind of maintain this true to form, for lack of a better word, to kind of JRPGs at the time. And it has a little bit of a similarity to Golden Sun in terms of just how good the storyline is, how well it's told, kind of a unique cast of characters. But from a gameplay perspective, is fairly different, especially since the combat system is based on like a numerical card-based system, whereas obviously Golden Sun is, you know, turn-based with more traditional JRPG elements. But again, looking at it purely from a storyline perspective, I think Fire Emblem, not anything in the Fire Emblem series, but certainly things in like Three Houses, if we're talking about a more modern game, with kind of that free roam aspect to Three Houses. And again, from a storyline perspective, I think those are both very strong candidates. But I definitely agree with Breath of Fire from way back in the day, Breath of Fire 1 and 2, a lot of the early Final Fantasy games. It is interesting to kind of hear those talked about like as a retroactive or as like a blast from the past, for lack of a better word. Because unfortunately, I do think a lot of them suffer from the same issues from games of that era, with, you know, UI issues, with mapping issues, direction issues, which have definitely improved in some ways and have gotten worse in others. So I think, you know, purely from a gameplay perspective, definitely some of the RPGs of that era, especially the ones that have aged well, like the Breath games, would be excellent choices.
Yeah, and I guess
I've never actually played either of the Breath of the Fire games, or any of them for that matter, because there's like
I've only played the first two games. I hear Breath of Fire 4, a lot of people like to laud that as the best one in the series, which I think might have been for PlayStation 2, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm looking at it. It was released on PS1.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And there was a Windows version, but it was only in Japan and Europe.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear that's the best one in the series. I mean, a lot of people, or at least one of the best in the series, which blows my mind because the first two games for me were just so fucking well done, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Also, now that I think about it, I think Tales games might kind of fall into this little
You're right.
It maybe not the most recent ones. I feel like those have kind of diverged like gameplay wise a little bit, but really, I mean, I think you could play any of them. And it's like, if you just like a good fantasy game with just like top-notch gameplay, I mean, you don't really need to look any further.
Completely agree. Abyss to this day is one of my favorite games of all time and will still make me cry. And I've played it through multiple times and seen the anime a bajillion times.
Wait, which one?
Tales of the Abyss.
Oh, Abyss. Nice.
Is it bad that I've played like 3 Tales games and I have not liked any of them?
Well, it depends on which ones.
Yes.
You're on the spot here.
Tales of Arise, Tales of Symphonia 2, and I wouldn't say I don't like it. It's just I got kind of stuck and I've never gone back to it. It was the 3DS port of Tales in the Abyss.
If you tell me where you are, I can tell you how to get out of it. I have the game memorized.
I got stuck in the mine.
We'll talk, CJ. I can give you a hand. Yeah, you're down in Exariath, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're at. I can help you out.
I mean, either that or I may just end up restarting anyway because it's been like 8 years.
I was going to say that's probably not a bad idea given you're at, without spoiling anything for the greater audience, Exariath is a major point in the game. So starting over just so that you have the context of like the beginning of it's probably not a bad idea. Or if you really don't want to play it, anime is fantastic. So it's one of the few video game animes I've watched that didn't want me have me tearing my hair out. So, you know,
that works.
What was your favorite Tales Up game?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, for me, probably has to go to Vesperia.
Really? Okay.
Vesperia,
okay.
I think, was 100%, and it just narrowly beats out Symphonia for me.
Okay.
Partly because of how they handled Yuri as a protagonist. Very much, and it is not just that he broke the norms or anything. It's not like some contrived, like edgy reason like that. It's just it was such a like it wasn't just that he was different. It was like he was slightly older than like the typical JRPG protagonist. You know, like 21 compared to like Yuji was like 16, 17 years old, right? And this whole idea of like, you know, his sense of justice, what justice meant to him compared to his childhood friend Flynn, like they were both right, and to an extent, you know, they're both wrong. The way they built their story sort of around these two childhood friends and their idea of like what's right and what's wrong was just so refreshing, and just very well done as well. And just the battles were great. The bosses were awesome. Like fighting some of those like giant beasts out in the world was awesome. I also love some of the weapon designs in that game. I don't know what it was about them. But yeah, I would say like my top three would be Vesperia, Symphonia, and probably Tales of Hearts. I actually imported the original DS version because it never came out in the States, and so of course I had to like, because I was able to play through the game without a guide, and then it went into like the world map, and I was just like, yeah, right, okay. So I sort of had to like sit down next to a computer to just like, because there's no way I would have figured it out. I don't know Japanese, so but then like reading up on a story, and that like that game was also awesome. It was on a 2D plane, very much like the original like Tales of Fantasia, like older Tales games. And that was another game that I fell in love with really just because of the battle system and the graphics. And I think they remade it for it was either the PSP or the PS Vita. I think they remade it. They actually localized it as well.
I think it was for the Vita. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I never played that. If they ever release that on Steam, Bandai Namco, I'm saying this right now, I will give you my money.
I feel like this has just been a plea to both Nintendo and Bandai Namco to be like, all right, guys, look, we promise we will give you our money. Just, you know, give us a hand here.
Yeah, Golden Sun Tales games. I mean, look, we clearly value quality in video games. Like, can you help us out a little bit?
Right. If only.
If only. One other thing that I will add in terms of recommendations to people is simply in terms of like how you can build characters to be like whatever they want or however you want them to be. Any game in the Legend of Heroes franchise. Now I could go on and on about that, but I invite anybody who's listening to this to check out the 2 episodes I did for the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 that are both an hour and a half long each.
Oh my.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah. And before, ain't nobody got time for that. But yeah, just go check those out. Because if I start raving about them, we're going to be here another 2 hours. Okay.
Well, it goes to show you that those games are good.
Yes. So which do you think seems more likely? Golden Sun 4, a Golden Sun spiritual successor, or a reboot of the first game, potentially the first 2 games?
Reboot. Yeah, just kind of like what we were saying earlier. There's been this heavy trend of re-releasing games, or like, you know, releasing the XYZ final supercut awesome version of a lot of like classic RPGs. Either that, or they're getting released on the like the Nintendo the Switch thing, where
Nintendo Online.
Yeah, thank you. If you're a subscriber, you know, you get access to all that stuff. I think if there's enough of if they think there's enough support for it, I think we could see a re-release, or at least, you know, a slightly improved graphic situation version of Golden Sun and of Lost Age. I don't know if we would see a remake of Dark Dawn, just because A, it's a slightly newer game, but B, it didn't do nearly as well as the first 2. I think we'd be more likely to see a port than anything else.
Would you be interested in seeing a HD 2D remake of the 2 games?
That's tricky, because I fell in love so much with the way that the original games functioned and played and their art style, that I think for me, I would rather see them stick with kind of the classic design in terms of like the artwork. There's definitely some improvements that I would like to see, particularly some of the battle combat stuff, as well as, like I said before, some of the UI stuff. But in general, I think for me, from a nostalgia perspective and as a previous player, I think I would rather see it be a little bit more true to form, as opposed to kind of building off of what they've already made and completely changing the graphical interface, or completely changing just like the feel of the original game, because I think they captured that so well in the first 2.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and then the first two games were also 3D. So switching to
parts,
HD 2D. So switching to HD 2D, especially when you have to consider certain like especially summon animations and graphics. I don't think HD 2D necessarily works with the way I mean, it could, but I think it is a feel thing to sort of keep it 3D and maybe clean it up a bit without making it without modernizing it too much to an extent, you know. And to more directly answer your question about like those three choices, I agree that a reboot would be most likely. I think it also makes the most business sense because as we touched on before, what's the Golden Sun fan base right now, right? It's people who played the games in the past, who are nostalgic about the games and enjoy them in the past. And then like some people who are just like, hey, these guys once said like when Brawl was about to come out that Isaac should be in Smash. Let's put Isaac in Smash because they don't have any better ideas. That's the Golden Sun fan base right now. So I think a reboot would be probably the smartest choice for Camelot to sort of like float like either re-release or reboot of the first game out there to gauge interest in the series. It's their safest option because they know that the people who like the game really like the game. And it has enough of a reputation where people who have heard about this game who, you know, don't have a Game Boy Advance or just don't really want to play an emulator can actually get their hands on like a clean remaster of like this fantastic game. And then depending on that reaction, I think they can go from there. So I think that's what we're going to see. Although if Camelot tomorrow decides to announce Golden Sun 4, I'm also not going to complain. So
yeah, don't get me wrong, Camelot, if you are listening, we will not say no to number 4. Just putting that out there, just in case.
Hold on, I'm making a list of all our demands right here.
So when you send out that email, can you just CC us on it? You know, we'll back you up. You know,
like we got the funding, dude. Please, we'll do anything, Camelot.
It's like that one joke I remember seeing from a Sony E3 conference. Like, hi, I'm an 8-year-old girl and I want to see like a remaster of Grim Fandango because I've always wanted to play it. And it was Tim Schafer that wrote it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But yeah, like if there was going to be a new game, be it like sequel, spiritual successor, remaster, like, is there anything you'd hope to see in like any of these cases? Like anything new, returning, cut completely, revamped? Like, what's your ideal scenario for this sort of thing?
Judgment turns into a Gundam for Isaac.
I would play the shit out of that game.
And Alex has his own, like, he takes over the wise one, turns into like some freaking weird ass like rock monster. They duke it out in like this final like kaiju versus Jaeger like style battle at the end.
God,
that would be fun.
What was that one DS game? Lunar Nights? It almost reminds me of that.
Oh wow.
Made by the Boktai team.
I don't think I've heard of that.
I've heard of it, I've never played it.
So like it's like a game done by the Boktai team that's like a spiritual successor to Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand.
That's why this sounds familiar. Yep. Oh my gosh.
But you're playing as like this vampire that controls like darkness element, and then a vampire hunter who controls like the light element. You're going around collecting different elements in order to like kill all the vampires, either out of revenge or out of duty. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, this is cheesy as fuck. But then like the game is cool up until like the end of every boss battle forces you to go into space in a spaceship and kill aliens with the new element you just got. Like alien spaceships that are piloted by vampires. Keep that in mind.
That's so cool.
And I'm just like, what in the fuck is happening? Wait,
I kind of love alien vampires though.
Wait, I'm on eBay right now. Let me see how much this thing costs.
Because I think I still have my copy of Boktai from way back in the day, but I hated the game because of the sunlight element. And I was like, oh, I have to be outside to play this? Wait, I don't like outside. That's where like
You don't want to go out and touch grass just to be able
No,
to
no. It was like I purposely stay indoors where I don't have to go outside to play video games. Excuse me.
You're telling me to walk outside my room?
Right,
Excuse me.
right. I was like, wait, there's an outside. Is that what that light stuff is? That's not a lamp.
I look at my left and like I see my backyard through my window. I'm just like, what am I looking at? What's that green stuff? Wait, is that what they call a tree?
Oh, I've always wondered what they looked like because I've only seen them in video games.
Okay, I, at the risk of outing myself as like a total psychopath, I would say though, like if we're going to talk about realistically what we're going to see in the Golden Sun 4, keep the party at 4 people.
Yes.
So that we don't have to stretch thin the amount of like useless characters that we ultimately don't really have to care about. Because I feel like Matthew and maybe Sveta were like the only important characters, and Amity for obvious storyline reasons that I'm not going to spoil. But I think if you just kind of kept like 4 people, and then if you wanted to keep like, because I know the Lost Age had, you know, the main party and like the original party, so maybe you would have like the original kids like Matthew, Karis, and the other 2. I'm sorry, I forget their names off the top of my head. But then like the back party can maybe be like half Golden Sun, half the Lost Age or something. So you kind of keep 8 characters, but you don't have to spend too much time having a, you know, going over like a new backstory for each character. And you're already familiar. You got the kids, you got the parents, you know what they're capable of. Maybe now you can spend some time like fleshing out the story, having things make a little bit more sense. And yeah.
To that, I think an interesting thing to do would be, sorry, I cut you off.
No, go for it. Go, CJ.
Like, did any of you ever play Final Fantasy 13 and how like for the first half of the game, it's like you keep switching back and forth between like different parties. Like at one point you're just Snow or like Snow and Fang, and then at one point you're Saz and Vanille, and then at one point you're Lightning and Hope, and you keep like switching back and forth between them until everybody meets up. Something like that, where like if you had, I think it could work, and I think Chrono Cross does this too, where you have party members that come and go, but you still get to swap back and forth between like every single party dynamic, so that you still are able to swap back and forth and play each different party and level them up and get to know them a little better without having to like sideline anybody specifically.
Right. I think it's less of an issue of sort of like sidelining the party members than it is just the way the game is like telling their stories, I guess. Because the issue with Dark Dawn was you had like your party was basically 8 new characters, with the exception of maybe Aelolio, because he was a baby in the Lost Age.
Yep.
But even then, you know, he was a baby. He didn't have a personality.
His personality was baby.
And he used move that one time, and I was just like, dude, what the hell?
This tiny tot will grow up to be a main character.
Using synergy? You are a baby.
This is why you don't underestimate babies.
Yeah, it's true.
Just saying.
If the anime Beelzebub is anything to go off of.
Yeah, oh God. Oh, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stars Crusaders.
Fuck.
Yeah, that was a great episode. Oh my God.
It's very clear that I still need to see JoJo.
Yeah.
I've never watched it.
At the very least, like it's one of those series that like I do suggest reading the manga as well if you can.
Okay.
There's something magical about like those older volumes.
Okay.
But anyways, like about Dark Dawn, you know, you have 8 new characters, and it's like you're trying to reintroduce the world, right? You have 8 new characters. There's a new storyline, and yet it feels like Camelot tried to carry the whole story. It's like they didn't give the characters much love, because it's like, hey, these guys are the kids of, you know, the previous game's protagonists, and they didn't really do much aside from that. It felt like they gave Sveta some love, but that was about it. So that was kind of my issue here. It's like, if they don't want to give love to like new characters, why not just bring back the old characters so we kind of know who they are already, and we don't need to like spend time, right, thinking about where they're coming from. And maybe that means that if they don't have to do that, they can give love everywhere else in the game. We don't have to worry too much about where the characters came from. We love the characters for who they are already from the beginning. And I think that definitely would help with the world building and narrative a little bit. That's it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to process.
CJ, sorry, remind me one more time. What was the original question?
It was say like another Golden Sun game was coming out. Like, would you want to see like anything new, anything old returning, anything revamped, cut out completely, etc.?
Okay.
Like, how would that go?
Kind of building off of what's kind of already been said. I mean, I was a huge fan of the original cast, and I did like their kids to an extent, because it was like, oh, this is, you know, building off the history of the previous characters. But I agree that I think Dark Dawn just tried to do too much in a single game and didn't do really any of it well. Especially with the original Golden Sun, GS1 and GS2 were originally supposed to be the same game, and then it was, because of limitations of the actual system, it was split into 2 games. And I think that allowed time to get to know the characters, to really flesh out this fun storyline, to see these characters, you know, kind of come into their own. And it still allowed for new characters to be added into the second game that still felt like they were part of this kind of ongoing whole. I think if they were to try to add, you know, even more characters on top of what we've seen, or I think it could get overwhelming with just the amount of content there. And if they handled it well, either by, you know, kind of like you were saying, CJ, of like swapping out your parties on occasion, where like you're focusing on these 4 characters for this part of the plot and these 4 characters for the next part of the plot, I could kind of see that working, especially if they kind of pulled a, here's the villain situation, and you're playing as the villains for a little while, and here's the good guys and their situation. I don't know if I want to see a 4th game if it means Dark Dawn 2. There would need to be some pretty significant improvements from what happened with Dark Dawn to feel like putting all of the effort and all of the like love and care that I do genuinely think the development team tried to put in into a sequel. There would have to be some pretty big fixes put in place for that, for me in particular, at least. I would love to see, you know, the Dijin continue, because they're one of my favorite parts about the games. I would obviously love to see the cast continue, because I love those characters. Just thinking in terms of like how some other franchises have done it, like Legend of Zelda, for instance, you know, it's been kind of the same main protagonists for most of the games. It's been Link, Zelda, and some combination therein of, you know, those 2 characters. And it, you know, there's very little that you have to establish about those characters in those games, because there's a certain expectation that Link is usually the hero and Zelda is usually a heroine of some kind. There's still character to them, but there's not as much of a need to focus. And I think if, to kind of both your points, if they continue with that, with bringing in the kids and the parents, for lack of a better word, from the original game, I think there's an opportunity there to do more with the world and to see how much this world has evolved and changed, either after the, you know, the Dark Dawn has arisen, or, you know, whatever happens beyond that plot. I think there's a real change to do some pretty interesting environmental storytelling. And I would love to see a game in this style tackle that challenge, and continue to kind of improve upon what we've already seen. Hopefully that made sense.
Oh no, I totally get it. I will say, like, the interesting thing that I keep hearing, and I was telling this to Andrea before we started, I keep hearing like a really weird rumor here and there that the reason why there's been such a long delay between like Lost Age and Dark Dawn, as well as like why they've probably not made a 4th game in the series, is because they've established so much lore regarding Golden Sun's world and its characters and how everything operates, Like they've established so much that it gets to the point of wait, how do we like continue to build off of like this and this that doesn't like conflict with what we've already established?
Mm.
That in like Camelot Studios, I think doesn't quite have the manpower that they did back in the day to make RPGs. And I'm pretty sure all the staff that worked on Golden Sun is gone too. So the rumor that I hear is like they may be gearing up for something like major, but we never know.
Sure. I think it's the same kind of thing that you see with, series that were really, really good in their heyday or like really did financially well in their heyday. Taking Fire Emblem as an example, and CJ, I know we had talked about this in the Fire Emblem episode.
Yep.
Of how Awakening saved the franchise, and without it,
ruined it.
Right, because fates can die to fire. But it's without that game, I do think the studio probably wouldn't have closed, but the studio certainly would have stopped making games as part of that franchise. And I think, unfortunately, Camelot ran into a bit of that when Dark Dawn didn't do as well as they were hoping it would. I'm sure staff was moved on to other projects. The games industry is not a great stable place, unfortunately, for a lot of people who work in it.
It's definitely not what it was.
Right. And it's changed, right? You've had franchises that have been around for 20, 30 years that are still very well established, but they change the formula in one way or another, or they use certain established nostalgia factors to keep that franchise alive, even if maybe it should be allowed to kind of die down or whatever the case may be. I think for Golden Sun, it definitely had its heyday. It's listed as one of IGN's top games, from back in the day. It won its awards at the time. I think trying to kind of bring back that feeling would be very difficult to do, given how poorly Dark Dawn did in comparison, if that makes sense.
No, I 100% get that.
Yeah, I think, and also, how would you modernize Golden Sun?
Mm-hmm.
In the 2020s, basically, because if they're going to bring back the franchise, I think it's not just what do we do, like what do we add to what we had, right? Like they can't really just add. It's an old franchise at this point. I think they would have to do something different, and that might just be too much. That's why I also think, after a reboot, if let's say, theoretically they remake the game and it does well, I think a spiritual successor would also be the most likely next step, because then they can sort of modernize their ideas without having them sort of directly related to the Golden Sun brand. It's exactly what, look at what Square Enix is doing with their IPs. They have Final Fantasy, they have their big brand that's constantly innovating and trying new things and all that and so forth. But that's why they have Bravely Default. That's why they have Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, which is an excellent freaking game. Oh my God.
As much as I hated the demo, I did end up getting it.
It's I'm telling you, after I enjoyed the first 2 hours. Even though they were in fact very slow, but the game just keeps getting better. It's so
That's good to know. Because
from what I remember of playing the demo, I'm like, this is the driest, most boring story presentation I have ever witnessed. The 5 minutes of gameplay that I actually got to play was really great.
And they have a very politically driven storyline that doesn't really have a business. It doesn't really have any business being as well done as it is, I feel.
Okay.
So I definitely recommend it. But anyways, no, the whole point is that what Square Enix is doing is, Final Fantasy is way too far gone at this point to really revert to a previous formula. What they can do is create different IPs to satiate the needs of fans such as myself that kind of crave sort of the old, those older games, so on and so forth. And that's why they have these different IPs. And I feel if Camelot really wants to if they really want to bring back the Golden Sun fan base, it is probably better that they just do a spiritual successor. But again, how many Golden Sun fans are there who would go for a spiritual successor for Golden Sun? You know, that's kind of the big question.
Yeah.
Maybe if there was like a remaster of like maybe the first two games first, and then they do a spiritual successor.
Oh, 100%. Like if they package the first two games.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
and
think
then come out with a spiritual successor sometime in the future called Silver Moon.
Oh God.
Aww, that would be so cute.
Oh, they have Lunar Legend already. Let them have their
I guess they can control the moon. Golden Sun will control the sun. You know, Bacti will use actual sunlight.
Yeah. Yeah, Golden Sun. That's just a big old ball of synergy, baby. But I think that would actually be pretty cool if they, like, for the Switch, you know, you package the first two games into a remake, and then you get to play it on a bigger screen than that tiny little thing on the DS or the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, I would love that. I really wish, like, I have no idea what I did with my GBA. It's somewhere in my apartment. But I would really love to replay the Golden Sun games on a bigger format that just really allows those graphics to pop so much more, and you can see things. There's just details that I feel like with that small of a screen and with that limited technology at the time, it was wonderful, but there's so much more they could do with that with a modern system.
Right. And they did, I mean, I know they did re-release the game on the Wii U Virtual Console, and I think the Wii as well. But again, we're talking about, not the Wii, okay. But again, we're talking about a remake, so like, you know, finesse it a little bit and just make it look sexy, you know. I mean, it's already sexy, but like, imagine even better.
Again, giant robots.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, giant mecha.
And then ninjas for days.
Just always ninjas. Hashtag always ninjas.
Yeah, I mean, the first time, okay, so the ninja class has this like single target synergy called, I think, Death Plunge. It's either like, I think Death Plunge and Death Leap is like the evolution. And it's a single target synergy where your character like basically like they grab the enemy, jump up, and then like pile drive them. Like they jump out of the screen and then back down. It's such a cool move. And that's what made me fall in love with that class in the first place. Just a suplex, and it's like, I mean, it's not a suplex, but it's a cool move. Okay, I don't know my terms.
Based on this new information, I'm sure your favorite ninja was Rock Lee, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, actually it was Kakashi.
Fair enough.
He's 100% my favorite. I think after that would probably be probably Guy and Rock Lee. Absolute chads.
Agreed. And that's all the time we have. Before we go, do you guys have anything you'd like to shout out before we finish up?
Shout out to Camelot. You heard us, babe. You heard us, dude. Like
Nintendo, Camelot. We're just saying, Square Enix, like, you know, anybody at this point. If anybody wants
Namco Bandai.
Namco Bandai, you want to take over Golden Sun? We are here for this. Support you. Just talk with Nintendo. I'm sure you can make it work. Like, y'all get money out of it anyway. So, you know, it's a win-win. Fans get what they want and y'all get what you want.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, we're passionate about Golden Sun. Like, I would never Lost Age and Golden Sun, my two favorite games of all time. I will always love them no matter what happens in the future.
Yeah, I've cosplayed from Golden Sun. I've done, you know, fan creations from Golden Sun. That game, both of those games will live on in my heart for forever. Like, they're some of my fondest childhood memories in terms of like video games. Like those have stuck with me all these years. So yeah. And
also, can I just say really fast, I know we're closing out, but like, I'm really surprised we just went through like an hour or so of Golden Sun conversation. We didn't even talk about the shipping community.
Oh, the shipping community's lovely.
I can't believe we didn't mention that in over an hour. That's like synonymous with Golden Sun.
I actually kind of forgot that was a thing, which is surprising because I ran into a lot of that when I was at the conventions in cosplay.
So that's another like 3.5 hours of discussion.
Yeah. So CJ, if you want to do a second episode of Golden Sun, just about the shipping, just let us know.
Yeah.
This is not something I'm versed in, but I guess this is something to let the two of you take over for.
I mean, if we just want to talk about shipping in video games in general, that's like a 12 to 15 hour conversation.
I mean,
Depending
shit.
on what game.
I mean, shit, that's an episode right there. But yeah, like this is a fun episode. Thanks to both of you again for coming on the show again.
Thanks for
Of
having
course.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, because I've just started recently doing this too, if you do 3 episodes, then you get to request an episode.
Ooh.
Oh, let's go.
Oh.
So
Okay.
we're at like 2 for both of you because I keep track of this shit in my head.
So if we work together and we do a shipping recommendation as an episode,
Yo.
we have 4 between the 2 of us. I'm just saying.
All right. I see you.
You see where I'm going? Like, you know, just, we'll you know, we'll work this out.
Yeah.
Just out of shot is me like clutching my chin with my finger, and I'm just like, how would that like 4 episodes? How would that work?
It wouldn't, CJ. Like, that's the problem, because that goes down a very deep rabbit hole of a number of things, both problematic and wonderful.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z, that's our show.
Shipping.
But yeah, that's our show. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and please stay tuned for the next episode. Have a good day and take care.